Julian from Zoe. Thank you, Zoe.
Hello. Thank you for the lovely introduction, and thanks for joining us today. Really happy to see a packed house. I love Jill Scott's presentation. That was amazing. So it feels a little like I've got a lot to prove after that incredible talk. Guys, you are not going to be in a room with a CTO advocating for experimentation quite very often. So let's really dive in and take advantage of today's session because this is special. All right, let's get started because I know I want to leave time for questions like Hugo said. Before I do that little pop quiz, just raise your hand. Are you already experimenting? Those are, okay. Right on, okay, so you can leave now. This is all over. All right, so again, Julian, thanks for being here, and really I want to make sure that today's talk is really a chance for you to tell this incredible story. I mean, you clearly have a fan in Hugo, and I want the whole audience to hear your journey and what you've done. So let's get cracking here, everybody. So thanks so much for the introduction. I'm Colin. I lead Chameleon in North America. Chameleon, for those that may not know, is known for something that's called all-team experimentation. All-team experimentation simply means is that you have a single unified place for engineers, product teams, marketing teams, data teams to come and build experiments their way. So you really have the ability to do client-side tests as well as server-side tests with a single dashboard, a single system. And that just simply makes experimentation easier, and that's all we're really trying to do, because if it's easier, we all know you do more of it. I'm lucky that I'm coming out for North America. We're spread across the world. I get a chance to see lots of different programs around the world, but really I'm here because Taylor Swift is coming soon. So, my daughter once asked me, Julian, does your company help or hurt the environment? And I had to kind of, kick the can a little bit. You get to stand proudly in front of your family and say that you help the environment. You want to just tell us a little bit about Zoe and your company?
Of course. Thank you, Colin. Thank you for having me. It's great to see everybody here. So yeah, Zoe, we're a science and nutrition company. So we don't necessarily help the ecology, but we really try to help people live a better life. And the science part of Zoe is really, really important to us. So what we try to do is help you understand how you respond to food and how you need to adapt your diet to feel better, to live longer, try to prevent possibly some disease. And we have our nutrition product, but also going back to your questions about what we do to help. A long time ago, when it was quite a thing, we worked on helping with COVID, and we had one of the biggest apps actually in the UK called the COVID Symptom Tracker that accumulating data from more than 4.5 million people, and that data served to sort out a lot of kind of problems and really understand the spread of COVID, also doing some actual research. So this is really part of our DNA to try to give back to people and try to help in the best possible way.
And also fine, prove it, Julian.
Yes. So as I was saying, Zoe, we're a very kind of science-driven company, and going back to maybe experimentation, that kind of gives us a bit of an unfair advantage because the company was started a long time ago with RCTs, so doing medical studies on people. And actually, we're probably one of the very few, if not the only company of our kind, like providing nutrition advice that is actually testing our nutrition advice. So what that means is that we do studies to actually confirm whether it makes a difference to follow our advice versus not following our advice. And so those are some of the results that we've seen with some of the work we've been doing. This is something called method study. And this is really kind of the gold standard of science. Like if you are buying a medicine, they are going through the same process. And this is quite an intense process because when you start it, you pretty much have to publish your result, whether they're good or not. So that was kind of the challenge we set for ourselves. And yeah, this is what we do.
You know, and I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head, which is sort of data and science is packed into your company's DNA. So you're bred to be an experimenter almost.
Yes, exactly. And as I was explaining, this is a bit of our journey. We started the company in 2017, run what's called the PREDICT studies, which are nutrition studies of 2,000 people, which is quite big for nutrition. And then it's only several years later that we actually launched a product, our commercial launch with our nutrition product, but at the same time, the COVID symptom study that was like really big in the UK. And pretty much since the beginning, since we've launched, we've been doing both feature and web experimentation in different kind, but we're kind of iterating quite fast. Doing A/B test is quite normal for us as a company. Yeah, we always have a lot going on, sometimes too much.
Fantastic. And now, because we're close partners, I get to tell my family that, yes, Dad helps the environment. You know, your story, and I mentioned this earlier, like I get a chance to like meet different companies around the world and understand like how they're building their experimentation programs. Every so often we do this big body of research that gives us some perspective into what's working and what's not working. We like to see what are leaders in their category saying about you know, how they're using experimentation and what's driving it. So here's a slide that I think, or here's a story or a world that I think you have all known at some point in your career, or probably even now. You have marketing over here. We all work really hard to get leads. We focus very much on the acquisition channels. We collect these leads and then we hand the leads off to a product team and we never see the leads again. This is what has classically been the case, and I think a lot of you know that the world is changing pretty quickly. So what's happening now is that marketing-led growth and product-led growth are really merging, and at the center of that connection is what we now refer to as a growth team. And this is really important because if you want to be on the trend that you guys have started, it's not a nice thing to have, what I'm talking about here, or it's not just a special thing that Zoe's doing here. It truly is a driver of growth. So just take a look at that stat here. Experimentation. If the marketing and the product teams are both doing experimentation, or if the company is doing web and feature experimentation, you see that they have a 2 times more likely chance of having those marketing and those product teams connect, okay? And if the teams are connected, look at that. That's 3 times more likely to report growth in 2024 than anyone else. All right, so again, I really just want to stress for you all that the story that Zoe is about to tell you and the myths that we're going to bust, these are really important, valid myths that are going to drive your company forward. If anybody's interested, this research, by the way, if I can find it here, come by the Chameleon booth. Aisha, raise your hand. There she is. We've got this. If you want to see the full report, you're welcome to it, okay? We also, of course, have it digitally. All right, let's do some interaction here. Oh, okay, well, I don't know. There's some, I think you guys have to do this. I don't know if anybody did that. Hugo or somebody? Oh, okay, I see. All right, let's give you a minute to rank these top 5 excuses not to experiment from strongest to weakest. So what's the number 1 reason why people don't experiment? I'd love to hear what you guys report here. What's the weakest reason not to experiment? Ah, okay. It's probably just one person's vote. Oh, fast changes, okay. Any predictions while we're waiting, Julian? What do you think's going to win here?
Well, I'm afraid we're a bit biased now, so.
I don't know, it's catching up. Okay, I'll give it about 10 more seconds, and then let's call it. Throw your answer in there, because it looks like you're having a real impact. But, yeah, we've got some almost, oh. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Wow, really, thank you all for doing that and participating. Did that line up to what you think it was going to line up to? Does that all, you guys look, nodding your heads, it looks like it. All right, well, I really appreciate you doing that because now we're about to sit down and let's bust some myths here. Let's try to figure out whether or not there's some truth to this. We didn't know how you were going to answer, so we're not going to go in order here, but it looks like it's going to closely align a little bit to how we looked at this. So let's get started. It will slow down our delivery. That came out as #1 for us. So the thing that I just want to highlight here is that, and I think a lot of you, because there were so many hands raised, is that experimentation is really about working smarter, not harder. So again, the idea is, what would you rather do? Really good quality work or a lot of nothing important work? That's, I think, the mindset that you need to get into. Julian, do you just want to add anything on this point here? I know that you had a really interesting use case that brought this to light that maybe you want to share for the audience.
Yeah, I guess maybe on the more general point first, I find this very fascinating that sometimes people think it's going to slow down the delivery because I think our experience is very, very different. And I'm, as a CTO, as an engineer, the #1 question I'm asking my team is like, tell me what is the impact, because there's no point in kind of building features and things that actually have zero impact whatsoever. So for me, when we say, slow down delivery, actually we need to take a bit of a step back and say what we're really trying to address here is not time to delivery. It's not very interesting. It's time to impact. And the time to impact is really, you really want to measure if you can. Sometimes you can't, but in the most cases you can. And for me, that's kind of really important. And I think in here, for example, we've got a very small experiment that we did on our mobile app a few months ago, where we just kind of gave people a few kind of snippet of advice, which is kind of start your plate with vegetables fresh or frozen for a fiber boost. By the way, nutritional advice, if you start first with the fiber, this will slow down your nutrition, your digestion, which means it will kind of slow also the kind of glucose spike that you have. So anyway, that was kind of a spike that we did. One of our PM had that idea that maybe this would lead to people completing more lessons, kind of understanding a bit more nutrition. And, ideas are great. We have tons of ideas. Everybody has tons of ideas at Zoe. But what we see here at the top is that actually it makes zero difference. And for us, that's really interesting, because what that tells us is that we don't need to go and build something very big to do that. Like, we could have started and say, hey, let's try to come up with 300 different advice that you could come up with. And actually, we started with like a dozen or something like that. So it was really a way to accelerate the learning time, accelerate the lead time to deliver impact, or not in that case. And I think we really need to think about both kind of the successful scenario where we ship something, it has impact, this is fantastic, but also the case where, hey, we had this idea, it has no impact whatsoever, how fast can we roll it back? How fast can we just deactivate the feature? Which can be both in this case where it doesn't work, or it can be, hey, actually we just introduced a bug. As software engineers, definitely we do that a lot. So can we put the traffic back to zero while we figure it out? And for me, when you put all those things together, you find that actually my experience is that it speeds up delivery, because it helps you zoom in faster on what actually matters, what actually does not matter. So this idea of kind of time to impact, I think, is really key here.
Yeah, so the next time I think someone brings you an excuse and says, oh, this is going to slow us down to test to see if it's working or not, how would you reply to them? Like, what's your angry Julian voice say to them?
I mean, my angry voice is a bit kind of the similar voice that I...
Professional voice.
What I ask my engineers is always, hey, great, you ship this, but how do you know it's successful? And if you can't measure in any way, it's quite problematic. It's like, how do you know you're actually going in the right direction? So when you say, hey, it's taking too much time, okay, but what's worse? setting up the experiment, which once you've done like a tiny bit of investment is actually in general very fast. I mean, we've got infrastructure and we run a lot of those every year. It's the transaction cost is very, very small for us. So is that really what is slowing you down versus trying to figure out after the fact how whether what you're doing is working or not? Like in my experience, the setup cost is actually very, very small.
Yeah.
And one thing I really like is when it hurts, do it often. And I think we really try to apply this, which is if you're not very familiar with doing those things, well, actually force yourself, because every time you do it, you're going to go faster and faster and faster, and then it will become second nature. But you have to start somewhere. That's important.
Yeah. So my advice to everybody, just that myth there is that it will slow down delivery. I think it's kind of a red herring or a false question. It's not about slowing down. It's about being smarter. So just reshift or reframe the conversation around quality versus speed, because what's the point of building something that doesn't work quickly? All right, let's move on to excuse number 2. We don't have enough traffic. This is obviously something that bothers a lot of programs and a lot of companies that are interested in experimentation. I want to get back to another example that you shared with us. You didn't have a lot of traffic. You want to talk about this particular use case?
Yeah, so that's an experiment that is actually running at the moment still, and we're basically building communities in our app, trying to get different people to match together. And if you look at the size of the cohort, it's not a lot of people are starting. It's like 2,000 people in both branch. You don't need like millions of users or even tens of thousands. And what's interesting is that actually in the span of a week, we already have quite significant results. In here, we're detecting a 5% change in retention. And then, yeah, obviously, we don't have enough users to be able to detect that in a matter of a few hours or day. But also in our case, our journey with our members is actually quite long, so it would not be possible anyway. So I think, obviously if you just have like 10 users or something like that, like it's going to be really hard to run experiment or statistically significant. But there are many places where you start to have like a bit of traffic where actually we do think it's kind of possible. Obviously, you have to adapt to what you have. You have to possibly wait longer. I know we're not using them yet for a mobile app, but there's some nice statistical approach that speeds that up. So you can tell us more about this too.
Yeah, I think that's what you said, just waiting longer versus not testing at all. Again, it gets back to what are you trying to achieve? Are you looking to create something quickly, or are you looking to create something that rewards your target customer faster than what your competitors can do? You set me up nicely. So key things that I just wanted everyone in the audience to know about is that really technology is moving quite quickly when it comes to data analytics. And I'm not sure, just pop quiz, how many of you have heard of Cupid? Raise your hand, Cupid. Okay, fantastic, great, good job. Cupid is just a wonderful way of basically speeding up the amount of time you need to get to statistical significance. It was something that Microsoft developed, and now Cupid is available in best-of-breed experimentation platforms like Chameleon. But it's there because it allows you to get to stat sig faster than traditional methods. And so again, just recognize that technology is moving very quickly, and you don't have to get caught in that myth, which, oh, I don't have enough traffic, I can't test. Another thing is just like you said, Julian, you can roll something out and see if it's working. It doesn't have to reach stat sig if it's broken, right? You don't wait for stat sig if something's busted, you roll it back, right? So I just want everybody also to be aware that feature experimentation is allowing us to be granular about how we control user experience versus that classic 50-50, wait X number of days, even weeks, before you detect any uplift or lack of lift. All right, let's move right along. Our excuse number 3, if we do our product discovery right, we don't need to experiment. Have you heard that before? I know you were already kind of, I think I already know your answer. Why don't you tell us about the dream state that you talk about?
Oh boy, I'm an engineer, so I can talk days in, days out about this. You know, we all have a lot of great ideas, as I say, and we do a research, we roll out, and ideally it's an instant success. In my experience, it does not happen that often, and the reality is way more messy. And actually, you need to keep iterating and iterating and iterating. And when you do, we do a lot of user research at Zoe, like a lot. But there is a massive discrepancy between what people are telling you, even if you have like really good user researcher, versus their actual behavior. And there's actually a lot of experiment like this you can do on yourself. Like I remember a long time ago, looking at the website for something to manage your to-dos, your personal to-dos. I'm like, oh, this tool is amazing. This is exactly what I want, like all of it. And then I started to use it. I was so excited. And then 2 weeks later, I'm like, I'm just not using it. Like I was just like so convinced that it was like the perfect tool, but then as time passes, I was like, actually, it's not solving my problem. And this is what we observe, constantly, and this is why it's really hard to do product development. This is why you need to keep iterating, try to go a level beyond. And for us, we have those long iterations. We keep adding features. We tend to have an idea, a vision of where we want to go, but actually the path is definitely not linear. And this was an interesting example that I've had it because for us, so this is like a screenshot of our app, and in our app, basically, we have snippets of our podcast. Our podcast is the biggest nutrition podcast in the UK. We were very, very convinced that by changing the design from the left, which is not the most beautiful design, to the right, we would actually drive engagement, have a lot more people clicking on those. And this is one of the things that's interesting because actually, independently of whether it would actually be the case, like we still wanted to do it because it was kind of more consistent with our brand and etc. But we had really, really strong hypothesis that it would lead to more engagement. And actually, when we did run the experiment, we found out and learned something very interesting that it was only true in certain cases. So that new design was driving more taps and people listening only if the content was actually very personalized to the person. Basically, in parallel to that, we had also 2 branches, one where it was personalized, one where it was just the top 20 snippets. And yeah, it only worked in kind of one of those branches, which was actually a very big surprise for everyone. And now that's actually quite interesting because that allows us to go like one level deeper and say, okay, what is it that makes it work in that case and not the other? So there is so many times where we have those very strong hypotheses, at any stage of the company, and then you realize that no, you're wrong. And I think you probably know that better than I do, but I believe I've read a stat somewhere that for web experiment, I think 80% of the experiment are failing. So that means only 1 out of 5 is actually such a great idea. And we definitely see that ourselves in web experiment. We do that too, not just kind of feature experiment or product. Very often it's a hit and miss.
Yeah, so I mean, again, like I don't know how many conversations I've been where top 20 hits, that just sounds like it has to work. User research initially suggests that it should work. You go and design it, you even develop on the front end perhaps how it should work, and then lo and behold, no, it doesn't quite work like you thought it should. And now it brings me to like this point here, which is it's not, as I think many of you know, is that experimentation is not this closed loop. As you can see here, it's really an infinite loop where you are looking to explore what works, what truly works. And then as you roll it out and as you see how your users behave, you're able to validate if it's actually working. Like Julian, you just shared with us, you know what? It wasn't quite working like we thought it was. And that's why you see the loop circling back to, okay, well, why isn't it not working? Sure enough, it turns out you have to personalize that feed. And I think that's a really important feature is like don't stop when you get a result you didn't expect. Continue the loop, continue exploring. That's the beauty of experimentation is that it brings you closer and closer to what your customers really want. So, yeah, thanks. You certainly need discovery, but it shouldn't be a standalone there. Thanks. All right, let's move on to excuse number 4. God, we're going to crush this one. The CTO's with us. Our tech teams do not trust experimentation tools. It's bad for performance. Have you heard this in the audience? Has anyone heard this before? Seeing a lot of nodding heads. Guys, just call. He's going to give you his phone number. You can call him. Just have him talk to your CTO. You want to, well, before I hand it over to you, I think this is a key thing that we've highlighted already is the cost of not experimenting. Just try to think about that. And Julian, you took the words out of the slide's mouth. I mean, if 8 out of 10 experiments on the client side or website are failing, then what are you doing? I mean, that's a remarkable amount of investment in things that don't work. And here you are complaining about milliseconds affecting the website. Again, I think it's usually the wrong problem to solve. Before I keep talking, Julian, you want to share your CTO thoughts on that point?
Yeah, I think for me this is quite fascinating because if you work from first principle and try to ask yourself, oh, what are the big players and other companies doing? You're like, is Google not experimenting when they're changing the web page, or Amazon? You're like, no, they probably are. So why would it be that the technology is not there to enable you to do that? And indeed, what's the impact of some latency on your website? Like if you are in some very specific case, yes, the impact is going to be. Approach was like really the opposite, which is why would it not be mature today, like in 2024? How is it that there are so many companies out there that are doing A/B testing and experimentation, and actually what would make it not work for us? So for us, we definitely tested that, and you kind of have to test it yourself because I mentioned that to you. We talked to several vendors, not just Chameleon. Everybody tells you they're the fastest. So you
We're
have
the fastest.
to, indeed. So do your own research, but I don't think this is like the biggest bottleneck in practice. And when you go more towards feature experimentation, particular web, for example, we preload pretty much at the beginning allocations. Like it's very well optimized. Actually, it has almost no impact in terms of latency. So as an engineer, like for me, it was like not really something I was thinking that much about. It's way more likely that if something is not going well, that the problem is on your side, on your tech team, than on the vendor. Like that's really my starting point. When something does not work, it's very easy to blame the other. But actually, in practice, you're probably doing something wrong if so many other companies are succeeding. So at least that was our approach.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that, again, the world has changed. If you're not testing because you think it'll have some performance impact, I really feel like, again, it may be the case that the company or the stakeholder hasn't fully bought into experimentation and they're using it as an excuse to not change the MO of the company, which may be rewarded on release and the how fast can you ship things. And so again, I think it's certainly a myth, but it also may just be a bigger problem that you have to tackle, which is how do I get buy-in for experimentation? And that means you have to circle back to the bigger problem, which we're going to talk about in a second. I don't know where to start. A lot of you are already experimenting, so this came in last. Julian, you had a real clear example. You want to just walk the audience through how you helped you define where to start?
Yeah, so for me, it's start simple, and there's a lot of platform like Chameleon that can help you doing A/B testing. But actually, you can just start measuring, start putting some hypothesis. If we develop that features, what do we expect to see, and can we measure it? And before, like we have our own kind of analytics stacks, and that's an example of a feature we built. Where we can see that one branch was definitely performing better, the blue one, with a very simple 50-50 allocation. Like you can do that actually without any tools. You can like ask your engineers to build it and just kind of set attributes on your users. And it was quite funny because we had a bug, and instantly we saw, boom, revert to control. And obviously, you want to be a bit careful about this. You want to calculate statistical significance, but this is a good example where actually you can start measuring things. You don't need to use Cupid or whatever. If you have those tools, it's even better. But you can start like challenging yourself to say, hey, our hypothesis is that that thing will happen. In that case, people will engage more if we personalize the content. Can we see it in our analytics tool? Can we run those very, very simple tests? And there's a lot of opportunities to do that. And it can be very uncomfortable because now suddenly it's like, oh, we're going to build this software and we have to be very scientific about whether it has the impact we have. If we go back to web experimentation, if 80% of your experiment failed, that does mean 80% of what you do does not.
Variant, right? Or putting the groups into a 50-50 split and just letting the team see that, oh my goodness, they behave differently and what could be the reason behind that. So I think that's probably, for those that are not having started experimenting, that's probably the easiest way to start, is just simply show that people, your users, behave differently than you think they behave, and you can, what are you using for product analytics, or what are you using for analytics?
We're using Mixpanel.
So it should be pretty easy today to be able, and again, I thought what Content Square was sharing earlier is that you can combine this into a pretty easy platform for all teams to be able to see what is working for a certain digital experience. And then, of course, for all those teams to experiment on that experience. Here are, some suggestions for those that don't know where to start. I certainly want to open it up to everybody to hear your advice, or what slowed you down, how we could fix it. But you said it yourself, start simple. What do you mean by that? Can you just elaborate a bit?
So for us, it starts with, we've got this quarterly planning. So, starting simples mean, hey, from the very beginning, trying to form an hypothesis as to what is one metric we want to move. Don't even need an A/B test for that. It's way better if you've got an A/B test because there's so many confounding factors. But yeah, challenge yourself from the very beginning, particularly, as I said, if you already have some analytics, to say, what is the minimum thing we can do to test whether this has an impact in a statistically significant way? Because doing surveys, it's nice, but not necessarily enough.
Yeah, and then some of the easiest ways I think many of this audience knows is what if we change the copy? What if we change the imagery? What if we change the UX? We think we know what will happen, but again, that's a very simple, easy way to start illustrating the impact that data can have in helping you make business decisions. So starting simple, but I also want to, move to that second key point, because sometimes I think folks fall into the trap of testing for testing's sake. To say that they do experimentation is seen as a buzzword or sexy thing to do. You want to make sure that you're solving a customer problem. And Julian and I had a chance to connect earlier. Julian, you want to share for the audience, when your engineer, what do you tell your engineers to do for you?
Yeah, so my engineers, they love coding, but this is not their job, and sometimes it's a bit hard to hear. Their job is to solve problems. Their job is not to write code. If you can solve the problem without writing code, this is even better. And back to your point, I think it's very easy to just have high velocity just for the sake of it. Just let's change everything. But you want to actually deliver some impact, and starting with customer problems.
Yeah, and I think for everyone here that may be looking to scale their experimentation program or struggling to get it off the ground, the key place for you to start, the healthy place for everyone to start, is to make sure that you understand what problem you're solving for. So you need to know, of course, that problem in order to develop a hypothesis, in order to build an experiment that will help you validate if whether or not your hypothesis is true or not. So again, look at that customer problem. I also would like to highlight that phrase up there, that management cares about. I often see a lot of teams just solve problems that they care about, or they think that their customers care about from their siloed vantage point. And I think it's really important that you look at, we've all heard, I'm sure, customer centricity. I often advocate, think about stakeholder centricity, because if you can understand what your stakeholder internally wants to solve for, then you'll be on the right track with using experimentation. So yeah, aim to solve a customer problem. This last one here, give each team the easiest way to test based on their skill set. Do you want to speak to that?
I'm not aware of any technology today that lets you kind of edit your mobile app and do those tests. But on the other hand, for example, we do email experimentation a lot with another platform, and same thing. This is kind of all self-service. So for us, it's always kind of trying to remove ourselves from being the bottleneck. And when we are the bottleneck is how can we make it as easy as possible to keep doing this experiment? How do we make that a transaction cost that is so low that in the grand scheme of what we're building, this just does not matter and it's a no-brainer, we can do it.
Yeah, just to kind of translate, at least for my little brain, I have to translate that. Bringing a WYSIWYG or a graphic editor to the engineering team for them to optimize the retention and adoption would go down like a Led Zeppelin. Whereas if you were to go to a non-technical team and say, here's tell me which SDK function would you use for this landing page? I don't think that's really going to go over well. So you really want to be mindful if you're trying to start that again, the world has changed. You no longer have to have two tools, one to do web experimentation, which is traditionally designed for non-technical teams, and one for feature experimentation, which has been traditionally designed for product and engineering teams. Today, you can have all of those teams working on a single platform. But just one point, and I want to be honest with everybody. You're not at utopia yet. Like, you're still on your journey of experimentation. How well, because for the audience to know, even if you give all of those teams the ability to experiment their way, you still don't want them to stay siloed. One team looking at their KPIs and the other team looking at their KPIs, maybe even two teams having like different statistical engines to validate whether the test really works, because for those in the audience that may know, that just throws sand in the gears of your experimentation efforts. People will use those differences, those nuances to slow you down and cast doubt on the ROI. Where are you in trying to get those product and marketing teams? Is that something you want them to do more together or not?
So you're right. We're definitely not at the panacea yet. There's so much more work. In some ways, we're both lucky and unlucky. Lucky because we have a very technical team. We have data scientists. We have analytics engineer, data analysts. So we're actually quite literate, which means we're actually used to do a lot of stuff ourselves. And then on the other hand, you want to actually get those people to do less of that, kind of rely more on the tool as time passes. It brings some challenges. There are some things that are actually very hard to measure with A/B test tools in our case, because if you're trying to measure retention, 4 months in the future, you can still run those A/B tests, but in general, this is not really what they're for. Or, for example, some of the signals we're trying to measure is, the numbers of time you do specific actions in the app. So all of that requires, a lot of time to integrate properly, trying to really establish, common vocabulary of what are the key KPIs you want to measure. We still have those challenges of, bringing marketing and product, making sure that, the segments we target on marketing are actually the ones that perform the best. but not just for the next couple of weeks, because our user journey is months. So kind of measuring that end to end is actually very challenging. And for us, this is we keep building a lot of code and dashboard ourselves to try to get a really good sense. That's there's no tool out there that is going to solve all those problems magically for us. But that's exciting.
Yeah, and that's I think, again, for everybody, like a lot of you have already started experimenting, but just keep in mind that journey that you're on, which is ultimately to create that growth team, to get those marketing and those product teams collaborating and having those conversations, establishing that vocabulary. That's the direction I think I know that you have said you wanted to take. So, Julian, that was incredible. Thank you so much for this. I've been hogging the conversation. I want to open it up for Q&A. I know you all had a chance to put your questions in, so if you haven't, please do while we get started. I'm going to go to the first one here. Is this? Okay, here we go. All right. Well, there you go. I think this is an easy one for you. Why don't you take it?
Yes, this is an easy one. So do we run all that groups? We do. Actually, one of our slides earlier at the very beginning had a yellow line. So what we tend to do is every quarter we set out an all that group. So an all that group is basically a group of people that will have 0 new features for that quarter. And the benefits of that is trying to understand not just the individual feature, what is the impact, but actually when you pack a lot of change, and we're quite high velocity, like for a mobile app, we do 2-3 releases a week, which is kind of really speedy. So the goal is to try to understand, when all those things together are added up, what is the impact altogether. And so we do this, for us it's quite important. We really settle into this rhythm. Every quarter we reset the old app group. If you're part of the old app group, no luck, you're going to have 0 features, successful or not. So obviously if something is successful, we're going to make a bigger shot about it. But we're actually very, very open about our tests. Like we're kind of remote first. So we've got internal discussion forum where pretty much every single test is documented with the learnings. We've got data analysts that really kind of explain what was the hypothesis, what is screenshot before, after, blah, blah, blah. And I think we celebrate the learning in general. It's like, oh yeah, actually that is surprising. So we're more interested again about the velocity of testing than whether it's kind of success or failed. And
when you celebrate, are you? What are we talking here? Like champagne party? Give us an example.
Champagne doesn't work very well when everybody's remote. And we haven't solved that problem of sending the bottles at home. No, but we have a very transparent culture, so it's really just giving people a shout out. Whenever something significant happen, either a successful test or actually it could be a failed test, but actually because we had very strong hypothesis, we're going to talk about it at the all ends if it makes sense. So we are very, very public about those things, and we're also very careful about tone. You would never see anyone kind of being negative about running a test. That's actually like what we're going to challenge is more like why you're not running a test than the result of the test. Yeah.
Wow, gosh, what a dream. Why are you not testing it? Again, why are you just assuming it's going to work, knowing that the evidence is against you on it working?
And sometimes there are actually good reasons, just to be clear. Sometimes we have a very strong vision, and we do not care about the short-term effect. We're like, we want to rebuild that thing. We're going to ship a first version. We do not really care how that first version performs. We just want it out there because we want to learn. And in some of those cases, we're not going to test because this is not the point where we're going to learn yet. The point where we want to learn is actually further along the line. We want to go there no matter what. So we know that even if we measure and we see, there's no difference, it's like, well, okay, this is okay because we want to go further ahead. And that's also fine. If you've got this strong vision and you know where you want to go, sometimes you can totally accept and not test something.
Again, it's another data point to be able to make an important business decision. As long as you're aware of the impact of making the decision without the data, then there's nothing wrong with making that decision. I think that's almost like a kind of a nuanced myth to experimentation, is that you have to blindly experiment all the time and follow the results of every single experiment. No, it's an extra data point for you and your management to be able to make informed decisions, again, at a faster pace than your competitors. All right, let's move on. Should you work within an agency or should you work with an agency or strategy for experimentation after implementation? That's an interesting point.
So I'm very biased. I'm not best placed to answer this question. Like I'm just a software engineer at heart. At Zoe, we tend to have a culture of we like to internalize all the things. So we like to build the expertise. We think it's very important for us to really own how we build our brand. I do know our marketing teams work with agencies, but it's more for coming up with the brand. It's not for the actual experimentation. So my experience is just not the right one to really answer this question. I just can't tell you.
Again, I hate it. It's the worst answer, but it depends. So I think, again, I think that the interesting point there is after implementation. I think anybody that's asking that question, you're clearly curious, and I would really encourage you, if you want, you can ask me, because I work with lots of different experimentation agencies, and I know all of them are ready to step in and do free, no strings attached consultations for anyone that's interested, and let them convince you otherwise. Hannah, you got, we love no anonymity. All right, Final question, great, all right. Well, sorry everyone. Hannah, thank you. You take the prize. What do you do with all of the learnings from experiments beyond take action on rolling out winning variants? Great question.
I mean, for us, it really informs the overall direction. Right. Obviously, like tactically, we're going to find out whether something works or not, but it could tell us, in product development, could tell us whether it's even worth continuing and investing at all in this area. So there was another question about a successful experiment. We've got an experiment running currently about communities. It's actually very successful. We didn't have very high conviction here, so it's actually going to inform probably the next 6 to 12 months of development for a team. Like we've got very strong signal. Now we want to go ahead, and then sometimes it's like the other way around. Sometimes like, we need to micro-optimize those things, and you realize it makes no difference whatsoever. Like we need to take like a totally different approach to the problem. So I would say it's really kind of, informing long-term roadmap, understanding better like the delta between what people are telling you, for example, in user research versus what actually is working. There's a lot of introspection trying to understand this. Again, I'm more like on the engineering side, so I'm less exposed to those micro conversation with everybody.
Well, I'll be fined if I don't mention AI in this workshop. So the rich are going to get richer. If you are already testing, you're collecting data that's quite valuable about how your users want you to deliver digital experiences to them. So just to answer this question, again, putting all of this invaluable data into a place where you can leverage AI to inform you about what's worked in the past, what tests should I do or not do based off previous experiments. This is in a very fast-paced, evolving space, and tools like, Chameleon has something called Copilot, or AI Assist, where you can begin to ask these kind of questions, like, what test should I build what test should I build next quarter based on the last 50 tests that failed? That's a question that you'll soon be able to really take advantage of. Thank you, Hugo. Thank you, Content Square. And very much thank you to Julian for sharing your story and for all of you to come. Thank you very much.